Good morning and welcome. I'm Bob Pace, and I'm your host for the podcast called Fight CPS and also how to keep your children or get your children back. I'm a father of six children, beautiful children, and I'm a husband of 32 years of marriage. Unfortunately, in my time of life, at the age of 60 in 2010, I lost my job through no fault of my own. It wasn't because I couldn't work or anything. Because we had $53 million worth of construction work with the state of California. And the state of California was going through difficult times. So the governor decided to be creative and he froze my contracts, wrote me IOUs. I tried to go to the bank to get credit lines. The banks wouldn't budge. They were so hurt by the 2007 of predator loans. If you don't know what predator loans are, I had one too. It's where they increase your income many times over to qualify you for the loan so that the credit guy who's giving you the loan gets a commission. And that was the big forte of a company called Countrywide Loans. So anyway, um, unfortunately, I couldn't start my work, and so the owner of the company had to let me go, as well as a lot of other people, because he can't afford to pay people if they're not working. And if you're not working, you can't feed your family. It was a horrific experience to me in 2010. Now, shortly thereafter, I started getting calls from the Child Protection Services in Orange County, California. Now, I have no idea at that time what this was about. All I know is I was laid off trying to get for work and try to keep the family afloat with my savings. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that a layperson was manipulating, or several lay people were manipulating the CPS, and I want to say system. The child protection system includes all the acronyms. It's a branch of social services, and it's supposed to protect your children from neglect and abuse and do family reunification. But apparently, it isn't doing that. It isn't doing that at all. Now, my case, what was happening for the first 5 years from 2010 to 2015, I kept getting these calls from the CPS, the Child Protection System, and saying, "Are you feeding your children? Are your children in school? Are your children clothed?" Now, I lived in a beautiful home in a private neighborhood about a mile from the beach. And believe me, I had the means to still feed my family, take care of my family. But what was happening is a layperson, which were my in laws, were making false allegations to steal our children. They've never been really happy with me marrying their daughter. 35 years ago, they weren't. And they didn't show up to the wedding either. And they kept inviting their kids to see them. And I think it's important for them to see their grandparents and their aunts and uncles and so forth. But I had no idea that they were trying to capture our children. They were brainwashing them, they were asking information, and this was going on for 5 years. I mean, actually, probably 10 years till I finally realized, uh, you know, every day I find something new. Just yesterday, I found something new about my case. And so it was horrible because for 5 years, my in laws were the lay people that called in the allegations. You weren't paying your utility bills. You had no food in the refrigerator. You had no clothing on your children. The children weren't in school. Stupid stuff like that. And of course, I diffused it. I even had the social workers come in my home, which I didn't know you're not supposed to. They saw my refrigerator full of food. They saw the cupboards full of food. They saw the food preparation area. They saw a very beautiful home. The kids each had their own rooms and everything. So they'd walk away dejected because they couldn't find anything. A lot of times I meet for them under the streetlight because I didn't want to invade my home. That isn't their home. Little did I know that, 14 years later, or I should say last October, I started preaching my 4 rules. And one of the rules is rule number 3: you do not talk to social workers and let them in your home. Anyway, my case started off slow and time consuming. It was awful because I didn't realize at that time, for a long time, I did not realize what kind of people or social workers of CPS are. Now, I do want to talk about how they interact uh, with this podcast. You found me on Facebook. I'm broadcasting on YouTube, and I'm using a StreamYard application. Now, with that being said, um, there are several ways that you can interact with this podcast. One way is to type in comments. Now, when you type in comments, when you're texting them, you need to talk about CPS. To talk about CPS. And what I mean by talking about CPS is that we don't have time to talk about all the other things in this world that's happening. There's so much I could talk about and so many things. I do try to talk about good parenting skills that will help you in CPS. A lot of us sometimes see we're not born with a book about how to raise a child or how to take care of a child. We're not born with a book about how to marry or how to work in a relationship. There's a lot of things we aren't doing. We learn from our parents and from our relatives and our in-laws and so forth. We learn from them. And right or wrong, some are good, some are bad. But let's stick to the child protection system. And also, when you text in, please show your name and your city, state, or country, and be complete with your CPS case. The CPS case is, I don't want to be like a ping pong game where I ask you something, you tell me something, and it goes back and forth. What I mean is that it's into 3 parts of your case. The first part is you want to start from the beginning and you want to give a makeup of your family. Is your family um, several children, several fathers, several mothers? Are you married or boyfriend, girlfriend? Are you partners? Those are very important to establish what kind of a family you have. I'm sorry. I was trying to text some of our people that really come in there. So, uh, after you list your name and city and state, and I say country because we have countries. We've had Australia and Canada and um, Mexico um, text in a message. Um, we've had from Europe, Denmark, Sweden, and United Kingdom. From Africa, we've had Mozambique, uh, Rwanda, and Liberia. And then from South America, we've had Ghana. And we've had a new one. We've had India, New Delhi, India. We had a gentleman the other day. So all I ask is you be complete with your CPS case. You know, after you identify all the parties, tell me what you're accused or alleged to be done. Is it abuse? Is it neglect? Or is it both? And then where you at on your case? The third part, where you at on your case? So that's one way to interact with this podcast. Another way is to call my number and talk to me on the phone. My number is 626 698 0990. And it's my office number. And you can call me at that number on my show hours. I'm on at 10 o'clock in the morning every day except Sunday at 8. And I'm on at 7 o'clock at night for an hour Pacific Standard Time. So I'd love to have you call me. It's really great because I'll put you on speakerphone and you can do that way. Now I'm going to make sure that my phone is set up. So so that's the number 626 698 0990. Now the third way to interact with this podcast is be a guest on this show, my show. And all you have to do is contact my show producer. Her name is Grace. She works behind the scene. She's a hard worker. And you just email her, grace@vincentwdavis.com. That's grace@vincentwdavis.com. Tell her you want to be on my podcast. You want to pick one of my 14 shows: Sunday morning, Saturday evening, Friday evening, Wednesday morning. You just give the morning or evening, and then you give the day of the week. And that's real easy. She will then help you get connected with the StreamYard application, give you a link, and then she'll tell you how to be a guest on my podcast. She'll help you with your lighting and everything else. She's really a very hard worker. I appreciate her all the time. And if you're listening, Grace, thank you. Thank you, Grace. Okay, so that's the third way of interacting with my podcast. I'm going to leave it with my phone number on there because that's the ones that are interacting and so forth. So what you're going to find with these social workers is that they're very corrupt. The agency is so corrupt, worse than the IRS. Worse than the IRS. I've never seen an agency so bad as the child protection system. Why did I say that? Well, a lot has to do with the character of social workers. These social workers, I'll give you 3 examples. Example number 1, there were 8 women social workers, and they're in Prescott, Arizona, and they call their CPS system, they call it the Department of Children's Services. Well, they took it upon themselves to buy pink T-shirts. And on the pink T-shirts, they put the words professional child kidnappers. Professional child kidnappers. Professional child kidnappers. And that's what they did. They're professional child kidnappers. Now, in your mind, you're probably wondering why they're considered professional child kidnappers. So anyway, these professional kidnappers walked around Target, Costco, Walmart. Anyway, they're walking, parading around with the message, we're professional kidnappers. And on the back of the T-shirts, they had stenciled, do you know where your children are? Do you know where your children are? Do you know? And these social workers were like parading around. And the reaction of the people was shocking. Here are grown adults with over 25 years of experience as social workers. And I want to welcome Rosemarie back to the room. Thank you coming to my live podcast. She types in, they gave me a date for when my daughter will come home. That's beautiful. Be careful not get your hopes up because they have a lot of ways of playing games with parents. But I hope it's true with the date because I know how much you miss your daughter. And I'm so glad to hear that good news. There's a couple other people that I was texting to my other people there. Now, I'd like to talk about the rest of my case so you understand. My case was a very complex one. It was 5 years of accusations were found untrue. But in the year 2015, the CPS workers got so frustrated that they contacted the detective. See, these social workers were just like the social workers in Prescott, Arizona. They were fired. The director was fired. There's lots of openings in Prescott Department of Children's Services if you want to apply for a job. But they only had one worker left. He was a guy. But these other 8 workers, all women, and they were all white, were fired. They were fired. And I'm glad they are because that's your typical MO. That's what my social workers are like. My case bad. And if that's not bad, let me tell you the second case of social workers. Just this last month, in Chicago, Illinois, on the Facebook of a social worker was an ad that she placed. What was strange about the ad is from 1848. What's that? About 15 years before the Civil War? See, 10 years before the Civil War. And this ad said black children for sale. Black children for sale. That's wrong. That does not belong in the year 2024. And why would this social worker from the CPS system in Chicago, Illinois, post this on her Facebook? Not only that, she was black. She was a black social worker. And she placed an ad selling children, black children for sale from 1948. What does that got to do with 2024? What does that got to do with anything in this world? It just shows you the typical MO, whether they're black or white social workers. I don't care what colors. They're all are bad. They're not transparent. They lie. They cheat. They bring you up. They take you down. And it's sad. It is so, so sad that we have these kind of individuals. So that's the second case or example of a professional, a social worker in the CPS system. They're professional kidnappers. They are looking for your children, and they are trying to sell black children. That is the worst examples of social workers. Well, here's the third one. And all these are recent. This is what I don't see. The Pink Ladies is 2022. So that is old by 2 years. But the black children for sale just this last month, and also this last month, one of the people here told me about a social worker, a male, who came to her daughter's school. Her daughter's 13 years old. He wanted to interview her, so he contacts the school, and he wanted a private room with her. Well, if you are a male or even a female and you're alone with a child, you have to have another person with you because there are pedophiles out there. And this guy was a pedophile. He asked the 13 girls to remove her shirt so he could take pictures of her. Well, that is an example of a pedophile. He should have had a nurse there. He should have had another adult there. But he didn't. The daughter told her mother, and the mother contacted the Child Protection Service. They fired him. They sent her a letter that they are apologetic. That should not have happened. She went to the police to press charges. And what did the police do? They did nothing. They said there's nothing they could do about a pedophile taking pictures, naked girl, young. This to me is stupid. What she should do is do a civil lawsuit. She can't get the guy arrested because he's been fired. But apparently he has a friend that works in the social service that's retaliating against her, and now has brought up new charges against her, make her life miserable because she had her friend, the pedophile, fired. So I'm telling you, you have to be careful. You have to be careful. So what I'm saying is that you got to, these social workers are animals. They don't deserve it. I've yet to meet, I have talked to one professional social worker. Her name is Carol. She's from Maryland. She talked on the show for 40 minutes about 2 months ago. And she told me about how they do the child protection system in their state of Maryland. Now, this social worker from Maryland, said that she had a clinical psychology degree and that she had further training with the Maryland CPS for 6 months. And that the things she heard from me, she was appalled. But she was very professional and she talked to me for 40 minutes. But what she presented was not what's happened in Maryland, because I've already had 3 or 4 clients call me from that state. But anyway, I challenge any social workers out there listening to please call in. Please call in. Okay. Now, I've given you kind of the makeup of what a social worker is. Now, in my case, when they got the detective, he followed me. And boy, did I get buffaloed. He came to my school where I picked up my son. He knew my young son went to school. I picked up my son and I drove off to go pick up my wife in downtown. Now, that was about a 20-minute or 15-minute drive and about 10 miles away. Well, as I went down towards the beach, along the beach, after about 7 miles, I noticed a black and white that sped past me, that made an abrupt U-turn, and then put his lights on. So I pulled over. Apparently what happened, the detective knew that I wouldn't stop for an unmarked car. His car was green. It was like a Lincoln, and it had no police lights on it or something like that. So this guy pulled me over, and this guy was very rude. He was a policeman in black and white. He was his combat boots, his vest. I mean, he looked very intimidating. And his first words out of his mouth was, "Do you know you ran a stop sign?" And I said to myself, good morning, good afternoon, officer. No, that stop sign you're referring to was back at my son's school, and it's been 3 traffic lights since then. And as I was saying that to him, he said, "Never mind, I want you to talk to the guy behind me." So out of the green car comes the detective striding like a Western Gunsmoke, Marshall Dillon, like he's a Billy badass of the world. Comes towards my car. And again, instead of a good afternoon or hi or how you do, the cops don't know how to diffuse. They just anger people. The reason why cops are shot, the reason why cops are abused is they don't have any people skills. You don't approach anybody with anger. You don't approach anybody with harshness, or that you're a Billy badass and that you're the toughest person around. He says, "You're going to follow me." I said, "What about the stop sign?" He says, "You're going to follow me." And then he said, "I saw you. I followed you." And I said, "Well, so I did not know the law. I should have said, either arrest me, write me a ticket, or let me go, because I don't have to follow you. You have to have a warrant, and you have to have probable cause. And running a stop sign isn't a harsh thing that cannot be written on a ticket." But I didn't know the law, and that's something I'm trying to tell you all. You're going to have to, right now from day one, is research not all the laws, but research things like what to do if you get pulled over by the police, what you get to do if you get investigated by the CPS. That's my rule number 4. And I'm giving the rule number 4 first because a lot of times I don't get to it. But it's the type of rule that you have to do your research. They're your enemy. They're not your friend. they're not going to give your children back. In fact, 99.99 times when they come to your home, their intention is to take your child, even if they're not in imminent danger. Even if they're not in imminent danger. And most people comply because they don't know the law. They don't know that you're not supposed to talk to social workers. Rule number 3 says don't talk to social workers. Don't let them in your home. And that includes both the police and the social workers. Don't let them in home. Don't talk to them. Don't give up your children. There are only two ways they can take your children. One is by imminent dangers, such as domestic violence has taken place. You're beating the child against the wall using excessive force. They're screaming and yelling and threatening shot. There was gunfire. There's knives, whatever. That's imminent danger. Now, my kids were in school, so I have no idea what the imminent danger was at school. They're in professional school. My second son, who was 15 at the time, was in a private religious school. And he was in the STEM program where he took science, technology, math, and English. My daughter was at a middle school, very professional where I live, been around for a long time, and she was in accelerated classes. My young son, who was, by the way, my daughter was 12 at the time, my young son was 9. He was 9 at the time. He was in 5th grade. Again, he's at a very classic school. This school was so above the norm, it had glass walls so that the principal or people could walk the hallways and see the teachers teach. It's a very open school, very creative teachers and principals and so forth. So my social workers thought I was in imminent danger, which was wrong. They weren't in imminent danger. And I didn't have to go to my home as the detective ordered me because I didn't know this. And other way they can get your children is if they have a warrant. It's a court order that's issued by a judge in court that has a wet signature and a boss stamp that you can fill the paper bumps in it. And it very specifically says some things that say who they are addressing this to. So if it's both parents, it'd be Mr. and Mrs. Pace. And then they have to put down the children, what the allegations are, and then they have to put the address where this investigation is going to happen. They got to put the date and time this is going to happen. With all the information on there, they can't touch your children. They can't come in and talk to you. And then my rule number 3, it's best not to talk to them because they'll use what you say against you. It's yes, no answers. And anytime you want to get away from the social workers or police, all you have to say is, I cannot talk any further. I need to speak to my attorney. That is your constitutional right to speak to an attorney anytime you're in trouble with the law. And so you do that. You say, may I have your name? And if they give you a name, you need to make sure you got their badge number if it's the police or a social worker's ID because they'll lie. Social workers are very good liars. They're very good. But I followed the detective home, and in front of my yard, outside my gated yard, because I lived in a private neighborhood, were 5 firemen, 2 code enforcement, 3 social workers, 2 uniformed policemen, and the detective. Now, why do you need all those people to investigate my house? I thought my house had burned down or someone broken into it or what? Apparently, the social workers were angry and they got the police angry because they had to go out of their way to do all this. Now, like a fool, I should have said, no, you're not coming in unless you have a warrant. Furthermore, I need to talk to my attorney before I go any further. That's what I should have done to diffuse it. In some states, they will get a court order after 3 visits, you don't respond. So make sure you do respond. You just call them up and say, I've spoken to my attorney. My attorney will talk to you. Now, if you don't have an attorney, you're going to have to somehow talk to them with yes, no answers. But also, you need to take your children to your next of kin, your family members, and hide your children. Hopefully, they're in another state, because the social workers will come after your children. They will come after your children. I want you to protect your children. I'm sorry you have to do that. It's not fair. It's not fair. But my case got really bad because I allowed them in to the home, which they've been in there before. But what had happened to me recently is my mom and dad were dying, and they asked me, could you handle our belongings and give them to relatives? We need to sell the home, and we need to have our belongings out of here. And I didn't have a job, because if I had a job, I would have put them in storage. I would have had professional people gather belongings. They had 55 years of belongings. And a 3,000 square foot house. And, or no, I think it was a 2,000 square foot house. That's right, a 2,000 square foot house. But still, that was a lot of belongings. And me and my daughter had spent the weekend recently gathering up the belongings. She was so helpful. The boys were too busy with their other activities to help. But my daughter helped me, the one that I'm estranged from her. She loved her daddy so much. That weekend was beautiful with her. That was my last wonderful time with my daughter. And it hurts. I know that you all have lost children. I know that you're in your case. But I am too. And I'm very angry that I didn't do the rules I'm telling you about. I didn't research CPS. I didn't research, like to yesterday, the charges that they came up with. I had no idea what the charges read in the code book. When you go to the code book, the criminal code book, because you see, what happened was, not only did CPS write me up, the police detective did an investigation, turned his investigation to the city prosecuting attorney, and then a couple months later, he sends me a letter. He didn't arrest me. They should have arrested me, but they didn't. They sent me a letter that said, you and your wife are accused of the following counts. Since I had 3 children, the 3 counts. The first account was child neglect or child endangerment, which is different than the social worker, but child endangerment. They also had 3 counts of sexual, but it didn't give the details. You see, I was confused until I looked up the code yesterday. It was horrible. And the reason why they did the second charges is because they had a game they play. The case went on for a year in the criminal court. It was a misdemeanor. And we were trying to make agreements or plea bargains or whatever. Well, their trading card was, we'll let the sexual charges go, and we'll remove all the charges against your wife, the child neglect. But you must plead guilty. So I did a plea bargain. Why? I was wrong. I should not listen to the attorney I hired, because they would have had a trial by jury, but I was trying to avoid my in-laws, my children, my family being in court for months at a time to go through the affairs of our family. And I thought, well, if my wife is free and clear of all the charges, and I only have to have, and at that time, I thought my child was neglect because I had boxes stacked too high. That's the way it reads in the paper that I signed. It says neglect. It does not say endangerment or all the stuff I read that the code has, and that stacked boxes stacked too high. Could endanger. Didn't say did or would, said could endanger the kids. And these boxes, by the way, of the furniture were downstairs in the family room, not family room, the living room. We have many rooms in there. We have a dining room, a family room, a kitchen, another dining room, a study or office, and a master bedroom upstairs with the walk-in closets and a jacuzzi, a private toilet, closet, and then we had a room for each of our 3 children that were still living at home. I have 6. The other 3 had moved out before all this started. And the girls were together and the boys were together and those kinds of things. They had their own room. And they had bathrooms to use. There were separate bathrooms in there. There was 1, 2, 3, 4 bathrooms. So there was plenty of bathrooms. But anyway, by the way, it wasn't the detective that did the charges. It was a district attorney, and he took many months to come up with it. And he could have arrested me, but he didn't. He had me go down to the court and how do you want to plead against your charges? How did you want to plead? It was terrible what they were putting you through. Not only did I plead not guilty, I was put in temporary jail in the courthouse till I posted a bond. Now, I don't know why my wife wasn't done the same way. Maybe because she's a girl. Maybe I still to this day do not know that. I'm still investigating that. And they put a restraining order on me against my wife and my children. And that's brought on largely by the Child Protection Services. Because the district attorney put something called sexual charges. It was defined there. They didn't search my computer. They didn't, I don't know where they got that. And they say those charges were dropped at the end. What I'm trying to tell you, you guys have to be careful about police involvement. They can make a report and send it to the district attorney who will prosecute you. And that's what CPS wanted because they could keep the case open. They weren't going to do anything until my criminal charges were addressed and taken care of. And I didn't understand why they prolonged it for a year. If I knew what I knew now, I would have said, all right, let's go to trial now. Let's get the jury picked and let's go ahead. That was the mistake I made. I'm telling you this now because I just found it out yesterday. My back is hurting. I'm sorry. Ugh. It's hard. It's hard. I just finally got some food and I'm happy and I got food in me and I'm awake. Because it's really hard to do this sometimes. So I'm sharing with you my story. I'm sharing with you my story. So, I have this horrible, horrible situation in my life. Not only did I have to deal with CPS, I had to deal with the criminal charges. They're a misdemeanor. And in the end, they were reduced. They made the plea bargain. They said, we'll drop the sexual charges. And they had to part. When you look them up, the sexual charges are saying you're drunk and you did ludicrous behavior in front of children. And that was not true at the case because, they haven't even interviewed my children. So I have no idea how they came up with that because that was a trading card. So they dropped that. They dropped that against my wife. My wife was charged with sexual charges too. And they dropped the physical charges against my wife. So she had no criminal charges. But then I had to serve a year of probation of hell. That's where you're assigned a probation officer. And what they do is they watch you every week to inspect your home. They give you a drug test every week. I didn't do drugs, but I had to do one for 52 weeks. That's $5,200. Luckily, I was indigent and I didn't have to pay for it. There's a lot of things that I lucked out because being laid off ended up becoming beneficial because I had no money. It wasn't until I reached the age of 65 that I started taking Social Security. I think you can hold off to the age of 70, but I think it was either 67 or 60, whatever it was. But my life was ruined. I didn't know that now 15 years later, I'm finding all this stuff that's bad. And I'm trying to share it with my listeners, you. And I'm trying to share that don't make the same mistakes of me. The rules I made are mistakes that I made. So I've said rule number 4 is do all the research. Look at everything is about CPS. Spend 40 hours, spend 80 hours. How they tick, how they work. Every place is different. In Richmond, Kentucky, they have to have a social degree, social work degree. They also get a license. In California, they don't need neither of that. My social worker was so bad. And I'll tell you how bad she was. They work on bonuses where they get $20,000 per child per month. The CPS gets from the state, who in turn gets it from the federal government with no accountability. Now, with a family of 3, that's $60,000 a month. If you had 100 families and each of them had 3 children, that's $6 million a month. It doesn't take that much to feed a child or take care of a child. And this social worker was finally put on the stand, and then she lied in court. And my attorney at the time, and I'm going to talk about him soon, cross-examined her and caught her with a lie. And she was so embarrassed in court that after that date, she talked to us parents and said, you know what? You're not going to see your daughter. And so she proceeded to tell her 12-year-old daughter, you divorce your parents, you change your name, you seal your birth certificate, and you get adopted into foster care. And that's what she did. My children were terrified of CPS. They do alienation there. They alienate the children from the mother and father. That's against the law. They do child trafficking into foster care. That's against the law. They don't believe in laws. They don't believe in constitutional rights or civil rights. Both of them will be violated in time. And if I sound angry or harsh, is the more I talk and the more I investigate how corrupt my case was and how bad it was. And you have to understand, when they took my children, I was 65 at the time. I'm 74 now. I'm like a dinosaur. Maybe a good-looking dinosaur. I don't know. I'm still healthy and I still go in the ocean and get my gills wet. But anyway, they are not to be trusted. I've given you 3 examples of them. And so I lost my daughter. Her birthday was July 9th. She's 22. I have not seen her since she's been 12. And it's really sad. It really is sad. I've not seen her. And I love her dearly. I always took care of my family. I always was responsible for feeding them. Even when I go 8 days without money for food, I somehow make a way to feed my family. I always do that. And I'm sorry to emphasize about the food because I trust people. And that's one of my biggest mistakes is believing in people. I know they're good people around, but it seems like I've just encountered all the worst people in my life. I do have special people in my life. I do. I do. And I love them dearly and they know who they are. So anyway, I'm getting close to the end of my podcast. We got to end the show promptly at 11 o'clock or I get scolded by my producer. I know I talked about my case more in depth than I have on previous shows. I was only trying to tell you you have to be careful of several things. I do want to end up with my rule number 1. Rule number 2, by the way, is paperwork. You need to organize it. And I don't think I have time to talk about rule number 2. But rule number 1 is you need a professional juvenile family dependency attorney. It's just compare this to open heart surgery. Dealing with CPS is open heart surgery. In open heart surgery, you get a professional doctor. You do not have an auto mechanic or a plumber open you up. You don't have a layperson open you up. So I'm telling you, you need a professional juvenile family dependency attorney who has fought CPS and won cases against CPS. An easy way to find one out is ask them when you interview attorneys, have you ever filed a civil case either in state or federal against CPS and won? If the answer is yes, you got a good law firm. And I want to recommend Vincent W. Davis. He has 35 years of professional law experience in the juvenile family dependency law. He's fought CPS. He's got children home. He is a trial attorney. He's done trials. So he has that experience. And he will see you for a consultation for $60 for 30 minutes. That's a good bargain. The number one attorney I feel that's in the country with CPS, Vincent W. Davis, will talk to you for $60 for 30 minutes. He'll help you navigate and give you ideas what to do about your case. And if you like him, you can retain him when you talk to him. He's in Southern California, but he'll work in any state or Northern California. And all you have to do is call in to 888-888-6582. That's 888-888-6582. And I had a ticket that's been scrolling quite some time that my producer put up. That is his schedule. It's Candely, CALENDLY.com/law office VWD /Bob Pace. That's Candely, CALENDLY.com/law office of VWD /Bob Pace. That is his calendar. You see an opening, you can put your name in there or whatever it does. Make sure when you call in, if you choose to call in at 888-888-6582, that you say that Bob Pace sent you. Also, when you talk to Mr. Davis, tell him that Bob Pace sent you. But he will help you. He will help get your children back. He's a fighter. He's won millions of dollars of fighting CPS, both state and federal court. So I implore you to think about hiring Mr. Davis. Your court-appointed attorney that you get is useless. They usually have 30 clients, they won't have time to talk to you outside of court. They may talk to you for 5 minutes before your hearing. But you're trusting somebody that's going to fight for you that won't fight for you in court because you can't speak in court because you're using a court-appointed attorney. You'd be better off at pro se, but your best off is getting an attorney. I'm not saying you have to. You can try to fight it on your own. But to make your life good, you need to contact Vincent W. Davis. So with that said, I'm going to end my podcast and give thanks to Rosemary and congratulate her on getting her daughter back. People do listen and they do come back and tell me. So keep fighting for your kids. I'll see you tonight at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. No, I'll see you at 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. That's 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time tonight. God bless you all. And this is